Get me that signal. We need no mind.
All right, here's Mr. Jonathan James. Jonathan, tell us a little bit about yourself. You can't see his poorly written out placard, but it says Jonathan James.
Well, thanks for having me. I am the editor-in-chief over at Daily Dead. We focus on daily horror news, specifically zombies, and I am also about to launch Deadly Magazine, where we focus on horror and sci-fi entertainment.
My name is Fleming, actually born and raised in Chicago. I live here still. It's my hometown. Lived in a haunted house. Grew up my entire life in Hoffman Estates, a house that was haunted. And because of that, with all the research and stuff that I've done over the years, I was very fortunate to do some TV shows. Dead Famous, Psychic Kids, made some guest appearances on Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, The Haunted, and Paranormal Challenge. So I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ursula Bielski. I'm the founder of Chicago Hauntings Incorporated. I've written 10 books about Chicago's haunted history. Like Chris, grew up in a haunted house here in Chicago and have been investigating the paranormal for pretty much my whole life. So it's great to be here. Thanks.
My name is Dave Schrader. I'm the host of Darkness Radio. I was also the lead judge for the TV show Paranormal Challenge. And like Ursula and Chris, I grew up here in Chicago, and it's great to be back at Chicago Comic-Con. Thank you for having us out.
And Jonathan, you also grew up in Chicago, or you were born in Chicago, right?
Joliet.
All right, see, so this is like a true Chicago family. Except for me, I'm the guy that brings it down. My name is Aaron Sagers. I was a host of a show called Paranormal Paparazzi based on my website, paranormalpopculture.com. I talk about the entertainment component of the unexplained, and I've worked with, I appear on Darkness Radio as well. And I've also appeared on Paranormal Challenge and a couple other places talking about the paranormal. So let me ask our panel here to start with, all Chicago folks, what makes Chicago such a great city for the paranormal? What makes it such a paranormal hotspot? Because it is known as one of the great paranormal cities.
I would say there's a lot of cities in the United States and around the world that have these tragic histories, but Chicago, I think, is unique in that we have a long history of our administrations trying to cover up the bad parts of our history. And any ghost hunter worth his salt will tell you that even if you remove a tombstone from a grave, you're going to have the ghost start talking, so that we start remembering them and talking about the ghost stories. And all around Chicago, you'll find that there are locations where there have been sometimes wholesale destruction of hundreds of people at one time, usually from negligence or greed, where there is not so much the plaque or a memorial statue of any kind at these sites. And I've always said that this is the #1 reason why Chicago is so haunted, because we do not commemorate our dead.
Something out of the deal. Yes, Mr. Dave Schrader.
I got to tell you, the coolest thing about living in Chicago, growing up here, hearing all of the stories. I mean, you've got the circus train wreck where you can supposedly still hear the sounds of the animals at night, although it turns out if you're smart enough to figure it out when you're out there, you're just hearing, what is it, Brookfield Zoo or Lincoln Park Zoo at night. But it's a great story. We've got probably the most famous in the world of hitchhiking ghosts, right? Resurrection Mary. You've got the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. You've got a ship sinking. We've got so much that's going on here, all the tragedy, like Ursula was saying. So there's such a great history. It's tragic, and it's an environment that we just keep building upon. So all of these buildings that were at one time, totally different uses, now those buildings are being used for things like restaurants, nightclubs, Hooters. Chris Fleming actually got to investigate a haunted Hooters here in Chicago.
At Wall Street.
Yeah, I want to know how we get signed up for that ghost hunt.
Is that true? I didn't know that, Chris. Yeah.
We got, in the 90s, we got called, our team at the time, there was a manager that just would not go down into the basement anymore where they store a lot of the supplies. She got pelted in the head by ketchup bottles. They had a box of ketchup bottles that kept flying out, kept hitting her in the head. So she was afraid to go down there. Other people that worked there had voices that they've heard. A man would appear in the bathroom and then disappear. They would turn the lights out, put the chairs on top, go downstairs, come right back up, and all the chairs would be down and the lights would be back on. So we went in there thinking, okay, it sounds a little extreme, but we caught some incredible stuff. The EVPs we got were phenomenal. One in particular was an old lady that said, "Get out." You could tell it was an old lady, so we had one of our representatives do some investigating and found out in the early 1900s, a woman that was about 90 years old was one of the original ones on record, had owned that property and had died. So we believe that that may be her. Everyone afterwards had leases that they'd get out of the leases after a couple months, they'd just get out of there right away. Nobody liked to stay in that building because of all the hauntings that were going on. We believe it was associated with this woman. So, incredible story.
I want to come back to the evidence thing, but did you film that, or was that just like a separate?
No, it was just an
a case?
investigation I did with the group I was involved with in Chicago.
Yeah. Is it still Hooters?
It's still Hooters. It's still there. They're the longest.
Who wants to go investigate?
Paranormal field trip, guys.
Well, I have to say, of course, Resurrection Mary is, everybody's favorite ghost story in Chicago, and that's something that's been dear to my heart for many years. And I'm always looking for more information about that story. Just did a big exhibit about that in Blue Island last week, working on a book just about her. Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, of course, I've got a whole website devoted to Bachelor's Grove Cemetery.
I love that
place. So
place.
much work there. Continues to be just a very enigmatic place with so many interesting phenomena, really, I think, deeply affecting people that visit there. For my money, I did my 2000th ghost tour over the summer.
Wow.
We have Chicago Hauntings Ghost Tours, who've been operating for 12 years in September.
I think that's
Not right. But it's been wonderful. But every night, the first place we go to on our tour is the alley behind the old Iroquois Theater, where the Iroquois Theater fire took 602 lives in December of 1903. Many of them school children that were seeing a matinee performance with their families. And that alley behind the theater, which is today the Oriental Theater, the Ford Center for the Performing Arts, which was built on the site in the 1920s after the Iroquois was raised, is a place where paranormal investigators still come from all over the world to investigate and try to collect evidence from that disaster. I have gone into that alley again over 2,000 times, and I never don't get tears in my eyes when I go in and tell the story to our tour groups. It's one of those places where you realize that there's something at play that's affecting you, even over 100 years later, that is actually interacting with you even now. And that's one of the sites. The other site is the site of the Eastland disaster, 1915. 844 souls drowned in 19 feet of water on the Chicago River in July of 1915. And it's still a place that affects so many people that visit there that just are overwhelmed by the sadness and the panic of that time. So these are the places that really get to me, these places where I feel still the emotions of those times. And I'm not as sensitive like Chris, but even I have feelings at these locations. So that's something that really stays with me. And so those are the places that for me. Resurrection Mary, probably the most famous example around the world of the many so-called vanishing hitchhikers or phantom hitchhikers that have been experienced all over the world and many times, going back to the New Testament when people encountered the risen Christ on the road after his death.
Christ
It's a spelling error.
The other one.
We were concerned that this is just going to contribute to your Messiah complex, Chris.
Wine for everybody. I'm working on it, trust me. I'm working.
And that's how we were banned from Chicago.
They all went in there quiet and came out drunk.
So yes, Resurrection Mary.
Many people have encountered these hitchhiking ghosts around the world. Usually a young woman with a long white dress and flowing hair, traveling along a darkened road at night. Someone will offer her a ride home only to have her vanish from the car on the way to the destination. Resurrection Mary began to be seen along Archer Road, southwest of Chicago, along Resurrection Cemetery, in at least the early 1930s, possibly the late 1920s. The most prominent candidate that's come up is a girl named Mary Bergovi, who was a factory worker in the stockyards in the late 1920s and early 30s. She died in a car accident at Lake Street and Walker Drive in the Loop early one morning after a night of dancing, and was buried in Resurrection Cemetery. And we have a long history of people that actually knew her that have testified to actually seeing her or even hitting her out on the road on Archer Road after coming home from the Willowbrook Ballroom where she liked to dance. In recent years, many people have identified Resurrection Mary, however, with a young girl named Anna Norkus, who was a daughter of Lithuanian immigrants who lived in Summit, just north of Resurrection Cemetery in the 1920s. She died in a car accident just before her 13th birthday. She was buried in her communion dress and communion veil, and many people have testified that the photograph that appeared on the cover of my book and in other places was the young woman that they had picked up along the road anytime between 1930 and 1990. So this is another very strong possibility. But there are many different possibilities for who she might have been. I think the most important thing is people are very eager to find the real person that she's connected to.
When I first really started following and reading about all the paranormal, Richard Crowe, who was kind of one of the godfathers of the paranormal in Chicago and used to run a tour for a number of years till he passed away, I think a year or two ago. Richard Crowe, I went to see one of his talks, and what fascinated me most about the Resurrection Mary story was outside of Resurrection Cemetery are all of the, what are they, brass? You have bronze bars. And there was a story that the police get tired of reports that there's a girl seen running around in front, but of course they have to go check. And the police had received a report that a young girl was seen running around. When they got there, there are 2 handprints seared into the bronze and pulled the bars apart. And the fingerprints were in there. It caused so much controversy for a while. People were stopping traffic to go look at these handprints. They ended up cutting the bars out and replacing them. So if you go, you can actually see that by the one front gates, you can see where they replaced the chunks of bars. But there were actual handprints, burned, little handprints. And they said that the heat that would have had to register was insane, and that it was able to pull the bars apart. So it wasn't far, but you know, that instead of just being straight, they were bowed out, and 2 handprints just absolutely melted into these brass bars. And that just captured me, and the whole fascination, plus Resurrection Cemetery itself, the mausoleum, right? The lights go on inside, the organ music will start playing by itself at night. So they get a lot of really crazy activity that happens there. And on Richard's tour, the very first time I ever caught a piece of evidence was they took us around. We stopped at Hull House, which I know that Ursula stops at too. And he was telling us this amazing story. And I put my camera to the window, flush against the camera, and I had my flash off. I just thought it was beautiful inside. It looked like 1920s decorations. And I took a picture, and when we got the picture back, there was this big white blurb on the middle of my picture. I was so bummed out by it. And I showed it to my friend Rick, and he's like, yeah, that one's ruined. And he threw it back at me as the picture spun across the table. I realized it wasn't a blurb, it was a hand reaching at the window like this. And I caught him like, oh shit. Because when I looked at it, you could see the fingernails, you could see all the different deals. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe it was the way I was holding my camera. And I tried debunking it at that time, but it was reaching this way, no camera blocking any part of it, no flash. So it was one of the most fascinating moments, but that was my first real piece of evidence that I ever captured. And I was probably about 19 or 20 years old at the time. Just an amazing place. And then there's the park here, the forest preserve near Chicago that has the big stone that's dedicated to the Native American family that was killed there. And when we started our show 9 years ago, I came back to town, and I was friends with a bunch of the ghost hunter guys from TV, and my buddy Rick was trying to hook up with a couple of girls. So he's like, oh, let's go ghost hunt this forest preserve at night. So we park far away, we go walking in. And as we're walking through the forest preserve, we see the big rock with the name on it, we're chatting about it. The girls are asking me 100 questions about ghosts. We get into the middle of the woods, and all of a sudden, I hear this wailing. I'm like, what the hell is that? And it goes from this wailing noise. It sounds like 100 dogs coming through the woods. And I'm like, oh, shit, somebody's going to die tonight, right? So we reach down and grab sticks. Right now, we grab sticks and we put the girls between us, and we're standing there ready to start swinging. And you could hear the crunching of the leaves and as it's coming through. And I thought, oh God, coyotes, wolves, what the hell? we're about to die and nobody knows we're out here. And it just kept coming, and as we were just amping up, you hear this getting louder and louder and louder, and bam! Not a sound. No leaves crunching, no howling dogs, no barking dogs, and it was gone. And I dropped the stick, he dropped the stick, and I said, I'm sorry to have bothered you, we'll leave now. And we backed up the whole way out.
Thank you all for being here, and please give a nice round of applause to these awesome panelists, Jonathan James, Chris Fleming, Ursula Bielski, and Dan Schrader.
It means that city
Thank
will
you,
leave
Chicago.
no
You guys
harm.
are awesome.